11 paid holidays, and you also get 2 personal holidays every year. Our benefits are strong, our compensation is strong, and I think when you put that together, yes, we are competitive in the job market.
Store your gun securely, locked, unloaded, and away from ammo.
When the museum was opened in 2010, Shenandoah was here, and this was an open-air gallery. When it was snowing outside, it was snowing inside. When it was raining outside, it was raining in here.
I don't have to squeegee a half-inch lake of rainwater off the floor every morning. Shenandoah is a local-built fishing boat. You know, it was a crumbly thing out back for a long time. It's kind of the vibe it had, but now it's come back to life. So we've decided to restore the port side of the boat back to its original 1925, and then the starboard side has been restored to post-1950s. It kind of shows the evolution of a boat fishing through time. How does something that's designed to be state-of-the-art in 1925 still make a living in 1972? We want to be connected to the water. We want the water to be connected to us. You can look out at the harbor and see the other fishing boats.
The Port of Tacoma was a great funder for this project. We plan to have all of the exhibits, the whole space available and open to the public by April of 2025.
Your life sounds pretty great. Don't let a buzz ruin it. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
There's been another deadly shooting at a local elementary school. According to authorities, the suspect acquired the gun from a family member's home before using it to take the lives of innocent children and teachers.
Store your gun securely, locked, unloaded, and away from ammo.
Good afternoon and welcome to Community Development and Environment Committee, April 21st, 1:30. I hope you heard our brand new theme song as you were tuning in here. Hopefully it will become something that is similar to Friends or Frasier, right? And so every time you hear it, you will think of the most exciting committee of Pierce County. It is 1:30 p.m. and we are ready to call the order.
Councilmember Morrell.
Here.
Councilmember Ayala.
Here.
Councilmember Kruger.
Excused.
Councilmember Yambe.
Excused.
And Councilmember Denson.
Here.
You have 3 members present.
Thank you, Brenna. All right, we're going to do approval of the agenda. Any changes requested to the agenda? See none, the agenda is approved. Now on to approval of minutes. Any requests for changes? Seeing none, the minutes are approved. And we have 2 presentations today. We will have our staff person, Mr. Mike Kruger, introduce those, and we'll get started with Sustainability 2030 implementation progress. Mr. Kruger.
Thank you very much, Chair Denson, and good afternoon, committee members. Your first study session item this afternoon has to do with some follow-up on a budget proviso from the adoption of the 2024-2025 budget. Section 34 of one of the trailer ordinance requested that Planning and Public Works, Parks, Finance, and Facilities provide a report to the committee describing Pierce County's progress in achieving the goals and objectives contained in Pierce County's Sustainability 2030 plan and its greenhouse gas reduction policy necessary for the county to realize a 45% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2030. This afternoon, you will get a presentation from Ryan Dix, who is now the Office of Resilience and Climate Action Administrator. So we have a new title and a new division that will be described in the overview. The presentation will update the current status of the county's progress in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, including action items and priorities that were described in the 2030 plan, including things that are anticipated to occur in the rest of this year. There will be highlights of work completed, data regarding the county's fuel usage, and a preview of the update to the 2030 plan that is underway right now and is anticipated to come back to the committee by the fall of this year. And so that Mr. Dix is going to walk through a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Kruger. And I will note that Councilmember Yambe has also. Thank you, Mr. Dix, for being here. Congratulations on your new title.
Yeah, thank you very much. Ryan Dix, Office of Resilience and Climate Action. We're trying to make sure we get that right. Yeah, so we can go next slide. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Wanted to give you, we do an annual, twice a year, we do an update of how the Sustainability 2030 plan is going. This year we have some interesting news in that we're kind of restructuring sort of what my traditional work has been as the solid waste administrator. So I'll give you a little update on that. We're going to go through the progress on the Sustainability 2030 plan, and then a timeline for the update of the Sustainability 2030 plan and what to expect from the update. My colleague Kyla Wilson from our group will be giving that part. So a couple reminders. First off, we have a youth summit, which is Thursday of this week. This weekend, City of Tacoma is hosting the South Sound Sustainability Expo, and we will have employees there as well working on that. And then generally, we're in Earth Month. There are a lot of Earth Month activities going on, so we have a great little website there if you want to check that out. So next slide. All right, so I think Councilmember Denson, this was in your district. This is Fox Island, actually, amazingly enough. So we have a new name, the Office of Resilience and Climate Action. Our acronym is ORCA, so that's kind of a funny thing. So our group, which had the solid waste team in it, is changing. So the solid waste group is becoming its own division under utilities. So I'm no longer going to be your solid waste contact, and I think that's an important thing to stress. I know I'll still be involved, but won't be leading the solid waste efforts. But what we are doing is adding we have the Sustainability 2030 team, we have the environmental education team, we're adding a new natural resources team. So some staff that has been doing tree work from parks is moving over into our group. We're also eventually going to be adding conservation futures to our group. So a land conservation sort of piece. We're also adding salmon expertise. So that's going to be a part of it, as well as the agriculture group is moving into, has already moved into our group. So basically, if you have a fish farm or forest issue, that will be in our new group. So happy to talk more about that, but we're excited about that, and we think we're going to have a little bit more of a unified effort. You're not going to have to talk to 3 different departments. You're going to have one department who will try to be getting good answers back to council. So that's important. As I mentioned, Solid Waste Division is becoming its own division, so Chris Brown, I think, will likely be the interim person to work with, so I'm happy to hand off any of those relationships if you have solid waste questions. And then our commute trip reduction team, which had been with us for a couple of years, is now actually moving to long-range planning. And that's a really good fit because Alon and the other leadership there both worked at commute trip reduction in the state level. So they have a lot of experience and ability to help them expand their work, which is great. So new natural resources team. I think generally we're trying to accelerate nature-based climate solutions. That's always been a section of our plan, which Marco for a long time was overseeing. We're going to be able to increase our work on resilience. So there's most of our focus over the years has been greenhouse gas reduction, but we also need to be focusing on how do we prepare for climate change. When we think about Pierce County, we think about forest fires. Obviously, that's a big one. We think about flooding. We think about sea level rise. We think about major rain events. There is work to be done, and I know a lot of you are very familiar with that work about how we specifically reduce threats to our communities. And that's something that our group's going to be expanding into, doing more work there, along with emergency management, SWIM, and other partners who are already doing some of that work. So what does that mean for the Sustainability 2030 plan? More staff time dedicated to environmental resilience, preparing for climate impacts, more financial support also to do that sort of work. So that's the quick update there. If we go to next slide. For some of you, you've seen this slide many times. For some of the newer council members, you probably have not. So the Sustainability 2030 plan was developed in 2020. It was signed by then Executive Dan Meyer in April of 2021, and we made a strange, but I'll stand by it, decision to change. The goal was going to stay the same, 45% greenhouse gas reduction by 2030, but every 2 years we do an update. And that's what Mr. Kruger was mentioning earlier, is we are going to be updating this plan towards the end of this year. The reason for that is that sustainability best practices change pretty quickly, and what we thought was a really good idea 3 or 4 years ago usually isn't 3 or 4 years into the future. So this gives us the flexibility to create essentially a 2-year work program that is updated and gets yours as well as the executives buy-off in advance. So that's really sort of our reason. You can see we started in 2015. We had a new greenhouse gas inventory in 2019, and greenhouse gas emissions went up pretty much, by 17%. And then you can see how from 2019 to 2030, we need to do a lot of reducing of greenhouse gas emissions. We are going to have a new inventory for 2022, which we'll be able to show you at the next one of these updates. There's still some work to be done on that, but we will have a new inventory for the year 2022 later this year. So next slide. So as far as the update goes, I believe there are 64 actions in the plan. So far, through a year and a quarter, we have finished 14 of those actions. 4 have not been started, but most of them are going to be started before the end of the year is out. And we're in progress on 46 different actions. And this is the entire county who works on these projects. It's not just my group. Stephanie and Facilities, for instance, has many of these projects on the internal efforts. So this is a lot of times it's also community partners outside of our organization. So a lot of work is happening. We're excited about that. We're on track as far as how many goals we thought we would get finished at this point. So that's good news, but we're hoping to get quite a few actions finished in the second, third, and fourth quarters of this year. So next slide just gives you a little bit more information on progress, specifically where the actions are. As you can see, most the large majority are either in progress or finished, with just a handful still needing to get started. If we go next slide, last time I was here, I think was just late 2024, so we gave you a bunch of updates, including the fact that we had basically been gotten grants for about $17 million worth of mostly electrification work around vehicles and buildings. So we have a lot of grants going on. I just wanted, for the newer members who weren't here for that, I wanted to remind them of that. But we're also very excited about, we've recently achieved Soul Smart Silver designation. So this is basically how easy you're making it for residents to put solar on their own house, essentially. And Soul Smart Silver is a very good designation. We had to make a couple small changes to how we do permitting to get to this. And we've actually been working on this for a couple years. We're hoping to make Soul Smart Gold in the future. That's something, there are a few like minor tweaks to our code that we can make to try to improve that, so that it's easier. If someone wants to get solar, the county can say pretty quickly yes or no, get out of the way. One of the big problems in solar is how long it takes from the person signing up to actually getting it. And we're trying to make it so the county isn't a part of that slowdown, basically. So anyway, some more work coming on that, and appreciate our folks in planning who do that work and are moving those projects forward. We do have quite a few solar projects happening in Pierce County, and maybe at our next meeting I can get you those details. That's something we're starting to track. So people are choosing to go the way of solar, which is great news. Both our Public Works and our finance fleet are participating in the Fleet Decarbonization Accelerator. This is pretty exciting as we try to implement the Electric First policy at this county. It's really challenging to figure out how you move from gas vehicles to electric vehicles. So, and as well as from gas vehicles to Renewable 99, which is the newest, cleanest version of diesel. So they're learning together. I'm really thrilled that both Finance and Public Works are working together on this. It's kind of a exciting opportunity for us to have a game plan on what we really need from an infrastructure standpoint to have more electric vehicles in the future and more R99 diesel in the future. So that's good. That's pretty exciting. The comp plan obviously was adopted. You all were major players in that. One of the things that came out of that was the up to 100,000 acres of land would be conserved. That is in line with our new land conservation plan, which will be coming to you all in a couple of months. So that's going on. And then lastly, we were able to get commerce funding for 18 EV chargers. And now both ESB, STOP, and what's that? CMF have these 18 EV chargers for our fleet. So that's just one of the other things we've been able to work on. So
awesome. Let me just pause you for just a second to recognize that Councilmember Kroover is here. Angie has a question. Did you want to wait till the end, or did you want to go ahead and ask?
I forgot I pushed that. I'd have to go back. I'll wait till the
end. Okay. Please continue then.
So other things that are coming up in 2025, I mentioned the land conservation plan. That will be coming to you in an ordinance. And I think we'll be, I want to say in early June. So that's coming to this group. The Purdy Community Solar Project, we received funding again from the state to do a solar project at the closed landfill in Purdy, so in Councilmember Denson's district. And we're working through a lot of details. Obviously, the tariffs are posing some challenges to a solar project of that size, but we are hoping to have a project wrapped up by the end of the year. And we're going to have a sort of an environmental education component of it, so that when people are taking their stuff to the Purdy landfill, they'll see this and they'll have some answers, some basically explanation for what we're doing, why we're doing it. One of the other big benefits of that is we're going to be able to take some of the money that is saved by the solar panels and actually give it out to community members and potentially community organizations is probably the most likely way we're going to do that. But we're working closely with Penn Light to do that, and that's it's a big project, but one we're very excited about. So, and then lastly, as mentioned earlier, the Sustainability 2030 plan update is coming your way towards the end of September. Last and I'm going to be brief here because Stephanie and Steve are going to talk about the EV first plan. But county fuel use data, we've been tracking this since I started at the county in 2010, which is kind of amazing how long that's been. But we have reduced our fuel use by 32%. You can see in this, the orange is the ferry, the finance fleet, which is mainly the sheriff, is in green, and the blue ESS fleet is the public works fleet. One thing I will mention is our fuel use basically was flat in the vehicle fleet, but went up slightly in the ferry fleet. One thing we're hopeful for is that the ferry can shift to Renewable 99, and that's going to probably be in an update of our plan. And if it can, and it's safe, obviously we don't want ferries not running. We need ferries to run well. That will actually be a really important way to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions for that vehicle. Those two vehicles, which use a lot of fuel as it is. So.
And I think we are a little bit behind on the slides.
Okay, sorry, one more.
Going, I think we're a couple behind.
Okay, my fault.
Keep going. And probably one more?
Yeah, so there's the 32%. Sorry, we'll go to the next slide. This just shows year by year fuel use. And you can see that 2024 went slightly up from 2023, so my apologies. All right, next slide. And with this, I'm gonna hand it off to Kyla Wilson from the Office of Resilience and Climate Action. And she is the plan lead, so.
Thanks, Ryan, and thanks to the council. Again, my name is Kyla Wilson, and I'm the Sustainability 2030 Plan Lead on the Office of Resilience and Climate Action team. So just a little preview we wanted to share with you for what you can expect this fall with the Sustainability 2030 Plan update for 2025. So starting last fall, we started doing dialogues with community organizations and agencies. We call these community dialogues. That continued through the winter, and then early this spring we released an online survey and social media campaign to get more feedback on the plan update. We've been collecting feedback from staff as well, and we're still in that process right now of refining actions and revising the plan. We will have a draft of the plan to share in June for a public comment period, and then be finalizing the plan, taking in all of that last feedback on the public comment period, and coming to you all again in September to present the 2025 update to the Sustainability 2030 plan. And just as a reminder, I think Ryan mentioned earlier that that plan is on a 2-year update cycle. So this is our standard 2-year update. It helps us keep the actions fresh and in line with community priorities. And the big focus with the update this cycle has been making sure we are confirming community priorities that we heard in 2023 and making sure we're not missing anything that has come up in the last 2 years. So that will then move through the adoption process, and starting in 2026, hopefully we will have an updated plan to start implementing. Next slide. So this is a quick look at some of the community feedback we've heard so far. A lot, I will say, resonates with what we heard in 2023 and during that update cycle. We're still hearing that community members are concerned about their home energy use and energy burden. Just silence this laptop. Community members are very interested in more opportunities to get involved and to learn more. So education opportunities, volunteer opportunities, community science projects. We're continuing to hear lots of concern around wildfire, smoke, flooding, and other extreme weather events. And I'm excited to be able to incorporate more of that resilience work with the expansion of our team into the 2030 plan to address some of those concerns. We're also hearing a lot of interest in access to parks and green space, which is very consistent with what we heard during the last update cycle, as well as access to transit and active transportation infrastructure, so sidewalks, bike lanes, basically being able to get around easily. And then since we've been doing a lot of these dialogues with community-based organizations, we've also heard a lot of feedback about their needs in terms of building capacity and access to funding opportunities. So we're hoping to continue to be able to support community-based organizations in helping us do this work with their members and helping them access funding as it becomes available. So as you can see some of the stats there on the number of dialogues we've had, some of the survey responses. We posted some of those survey questions on Nextdoor, which got a huge response, which is great, really supplementing the amount of feedback we got. And we also worked with the UW Nursing School program. They collected some interviews and also collected dot board feedback on campus. And so that's really interesting to look at and hear more from our student population. They also interviewed folks they work with in the healthcare field, which is an area that we don't have access to or as many relationships with. So it's been great to hear some of that more health-focused feedback. Next slide. So with the changes we're making to the Office of Resilience and Climate Action and some of this community feedback, here's some of the major themes you can expect for the 2025 update. There's going to be more of a focus on land conservation, on agriculture, forests, and habitat restoration through that land conservation, green economy and green jobs pathways, climate resilience work, expanding relationship with partners, and all of this ties into the moving forward together vision from the executive's office and making connections to housing and equity work. And if we move to the next slide, I think we open for questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Mr. Dix, what questions does the committee have? Councilmember Morell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just curious, in your community feedback preview, you have multiple UW students engagement. Why that group and not property owners, you know, constituents out there? Why are you focusing on UW?
So this was an opportunity that came to us from a professor at UW to get their students who were involved in a climate and health class to help us collect feedback on the plan. So the students did not just talk to other students, they talked to people throughout the healthcare network. It could be friends, family members that they interviewed, people that they work with in the hospitals. And then they also collected feedback on campus from anyone who is on campus. And so that can be students, people walking through campus, people who work for the campus. So they also collected data on where people were from. So we actually have a map of where that feedback came from, and it is outside of the Tacoma limits. But the reason why we wanted to share that data is that it was a student project that was really fed into this plan. It was not something that we relied on for updating the plan. It was more of an opportunity to incorporate some of that health feedback that we wanted to highlight. We did collect dialogues, do interviews with the business community and, you know, like Economic Development Board, Workforce Central, the Master Builders Association, the Chamber of Commerce. They've all been part of these agency dialogues.
Okay, thank you for expanding on that explanation. It just kind of looks a little bit awkward to me. But there again, the other question that I had, and this might be Mr. Kruger's, could jump in here if Mr. Dix can't answer this. Are solar farms allowed on agricultural property?
This is a current topic. My understanding is it depends on the size of it. But I think this is work that our agricultural group is going to be digging into. I don't want to go too deep into it because I'm learning as I start to take on these agricultural issues. I think if it's on like the house, I think that's a yes. I think if it's more like on the land, that's maybe not clear at this point. So there's more work to be figured out there.
As I look nationwide, for us to continue to retain farmland, we need to give them all the opportunities or tools in their toolbox that they can use. If they decide to use half their property for a solar farm, why not?
Yeah.
You know, that's my feelings on it. If we really want to retain farmland for open space, then, you know, let it become some kind of an income generator for those who own those properties. So I'm, you know, looking at it Mr. Kruger. Just put that down in your notes when we come up with codes and other things.
Thank you, Councilmember Morell. I'm trying to quickly scurry here and take a look at the zoning code right now. And it looks like so if we're talking about agricultural resource lands, ARL, so the high quality dirt, the answer would be no. Other designations that are rural that likely have farms, the answer is probably yes. So again, it would depend upon the scale. There's several levels of electrical generation facilities that our code addresses. Certainly something that you could look at, though, as part of the development regulation package that's coming, as part of the implementation of the comprehensive plan. So note will be added to our list.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. We'll get back to you on that too.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Morell. Next, we have a question from Councilmember Ayala.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. I'm curious if you could share more on the topic that you brought up around using the savings from solar panels to redistribute back into community, and kind of where in that thought through or planning process we are and what we need to think about.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Part of the Commerce Grant was if you do a solar project to try to make basically make it more affordable for people in that community. Specifically, this is at the Purdy transfer station. And so this would be looking in Penn Light's area specifically, because they're the utility that we're working with, to potentially providing money to basically reduce electric bills for nonprofit organizations. And that's what we wrote into the grant, and so that's what we expect to do. I don't want to go too far down the road on that because we haven't done that yet. And so it's something we're hoping to do in the future with the money that's coming back. It is a state-funded grant, and so it doesn't make sense, and it's not allowed, frankly, for the county just to accept the money from the solar project. So anyway, so that's the plan, is hoping to work with people in Penn Light's area to reduce their electric bill and help them kind of move forward in the nonprofit world. So
great, thank you. And then my next question, I'm really fascinated by this 483 next door survey result. Can you share a little bit, if you have it, the breakdown of what that looked like throughout the county?
Do you mean the geographic spread of those responses? That's a really great question, and I'm not sure if we have access to that information through Nextdoor, but I will definitely follow up with our communication staff and find out if we can get any demographic information from those Nextdoor responses. I know it's not quite the same as with Facebook and Instagram, where they make really pretty dashboards for you of all that information. I'm not sure if we have the same ability to look at that with Nextdoor, but we can definitely try and find out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
At least with Nextdoor, I would think you'd be able to see how many came from each of their Nextdoor kind of geographic areas, which would be interesting. And with the Penn Light project, thanks to Penn Light for being a partner in that, and I can't wait to hear more about that. That's really exciting. Councilmember Kruger.
Thank you, Chair. I have to go back to 2010 as well, because I think what started as a 2-year, $4 million federal grant has now morphed into quite the transformational little industry here. And I'm interested in, because it is sustainability, I'm wondering, is there a guesstimate that has been made on, because it looks to me like there's some expansion going on what it will, the ask will be in the budget for maintaining this department and the departments that seem to be branching off?
Yeah, I can take that one. Right now, we're just kind of starting our budgeting process as part of planning public works. The Sustainable Resources, I should say, the ORCA group is not currently asking for new FTEs right now. I can't promise that won't change, but that's not where we're starting. A lot of the work we need to get done is on professional services side. So I don't want to get ahead of it because we haven't finalized internally our work. But anyway, it's. I talked about the $17 million in grants that are coming back. Our work is, I think, much cheaper than that. So we have a real, from a taxpayer benefit side, we're bringing back dollars to the community, and that is valuable, but I also understand it's your obligation to look at our costs and make decisions, and that's why you all have the final say on all that. So,
Yeah, 17 million. I mean, assuming a lot of that came out of our taxpayers' pocket anyway. That's a lot of money.
The majority of it is federal and state taxes.
The youth summit.
Yeah.
So what? Is this just like more educational programs, or getting things that they already get in school, and things that, like when I go to Nisqually River Council meetings, they have a whole educational system. They are doing all kinds of work in that field as well. It seems like there's a lot of duplicating services on that.
Yeah, this is more focused on greenhouse gas reduction work and on climate resilience work than salmon, just salmon. I haven't been to the Nisqually meetings, so I don't know that they're only working on salmon, but I think they're probably working on restoration as well.
They do all kinds.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they have that. And there's that with the Green Congress that I think 400 students or whatever go to that once a year. Because I guess kind of my concern on some of the greenhouse gas reductions. I had read in here somewhere, was it 17%? A 17% cut in what? There was like 17.3 million metric tons that I think it was mentioned about being removed from. Was that in this presentation, or did I read that in something else? But I guess in the scale of that sounds like a lot, but 17.3 million metric tons of CO2 is a 0.0022 parts per million increase in atmosphere. So I have to wonder about the full impact of that, because we're doing a lot of programming to reduce something, and I'm just, the impact won't matter in the long run. On the electric savings, is there like any kind of a comparison that says, here's what the bills are now, and by implementing all of these things for electric, this is what we're saving? Is it to be transparent for our constituents? Is there anything like that?
Yeah, I might have to defer to Stephanie Liesel, who's in the background and speaking next, about specific electric savings at the county buildings. Is that what you're referring to? Or county
Well,
fleet?
it just from all of the electric, you've got the farm going on out in Purdy, and the electrifying the government, electrifying vehicles and whatnot. I'm just.
I mean, it's hard for me to speculate, but broadly speaking, we have very affordable electricity in the Pacific Northwest, and it's hydropower, so it's both clean and cheap. Compared to the rest of the United States. So it's definitely cheaper to own and operate electric vehicles than gas vehicles right now.
And I know that on the commute trip reduction, that's being moved to the long range planning. Now that I know has been a part since Gregoire was governor. And I'm wondering how much has that been changing over the years? Because it's been big investments in doing commute trip reductions, and it's still ongoing. And I just don't know how that can be much more effective, at least in Pierce County, because of the way, we've got the line, the transit and whatnot. And
I mean, I think, and I'm no longer overseeing commute trip reduction, so I don't want to go too far into this, but I will say that telework has had a very positive effect on reducing traffic. From our standpoint, at least at the county, we all sign telework agreements. And so there is, I think that's been a once in a lifetime sort of change where people are able to work more from home or from an office closer to where they live. And I know facilities and others are working on, making that work for everyone. And it doesn't work for everyone, obviously, but the more we can do it, it's the same as people carpooling or not traveling at all. It's actually even better than carpooling. So.
And then with the conservation plan, with the up to 100,000 acres, is there like a map of the county that is showing, this is already federal land, this is the state land, here is the size of what is being looked at to conserve, and how that pans out in the county, just to have that transparency again for our constituents to see what's going on?
We certainly have maps that have the federal and state land on them. I think almost all of our maps do. As far as us saying this is what 100,000 acres looks like, we have not done that. We have I'm sure our GIS department has the capacity to do something like that.
That would be a good visual to
But,
have
yeah.
in addition to all of the lands that are in, park
And just
with
because I've
land
worked-
trust.
yeah,
and
no,
et
I
cetera.
worked in this field. I believe there's like 250,000 acres of forest land in Pierce County. So 100,000, while quite large, is not going to be like the whole county, other than
No.
state and federal lands. So,
Because
yeah.
I think the state already is like 65% forest land. And I just
Not
wonder
sure.
what the economic impact would be to remove more,
Yeah, and this is, we're going to discuss the land conservation plan in a couple months, but I will say this, that the intent is not in any way to reduce the rural economy. The intent is actually to strengthen, keep our working forests working and our farmland working. There's a difference between preservation and conservation. Conservation is keeping it in a working, active way. Preservation is where you're saying we're not going to build anything or do anything here, really. And what we're talking about primarily is conservation. So we want people to continue to work on forest lands and farms. So.
okay, yeah, because isn't the state already got programmed? We'll find out later. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Looks like we have another question from Councilmember Morrell.
Just under the wire. Thank you, Madam Chair. I am interested in your renewable diesel, your R99.
Yeah.
Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Sure. So when I started working on these issues, biodiesel was the cleanest, the lowest greenhouse gas fuel that you could run. And so we ran B20 in most of our diesel fleet, I want to say for the last 6 to 8 years, and didn't have any real problems at all. It worked out quite well. But you know, everyone wants to make sure it's going to work before we do it. So we did a bunch of pilots, got there. Now there's something called Renewable 99, and it is not, biodiesel is different. It's a different process that makes it than regular diesel. R99 is the same process, but it's just using cleaner fuel. It's using, I don't want to get into it because there's a lot of different opportunities, but it's using lower carbon fuel, but it's what they call a drop-in fuel. So fleet managers are much more accepting of that because it just acts like diesel. So in a way, this is even easier for fleet managers or a ferry manager to accept, is this is just like diesel. If you just took a little bit of it, it would look and act just like it, but it actually has a much lower greenhouse gas emissions, and there are companies who have to prove that at the state and federal level. So it's, to me, it's a very easy situation. The drop-in fuel is the ideal fuel. Biodiesel was a harder hurdle because it was different and had the potential of not working great in really low temperatures, but that proved not to be a problem in Pierce County.
So as far as refineries go, is there an ample supply of R99?
Yeah, so you'll recall that the state passed a clean fuel standard, I want to say like 2 years ago, and there wasn't enough of R99 in Washington State because we didn't have a clean fuel standard. Once the clean fuel standard was passed, it put us on basically the same plane as both California, Oregon, and British Columbia. They had all passed it. So the suppliers were selling it to those places and not Washington. As of 2 years ago, they're now selling it to Washington. And it is, because of the clean fuel standard, it's the same price or less than regular diesel. So we're not even paying a premium at this point. Now that always can change, things go up and down, but right now R99 is the same price as regular diesel and it has lower carbon in it.
Okay, I just have never heard that, and that's all I run.
No problem.
Diesels.
Yeah,
So
it's
is it just being sold in the bulk market?
Where do you get it?
I don't want to say that I know that completely, but I know that it's hard to find unless you're in a major fleet that's buying a lot of it. I think that's fair to say. So our fleet, because we have a lot of trucks and a lot of big vehicles, can work for get a supply of R99.
Okay,
So,
and it doesn't void the warranty on our engines?
my understanding is it does not, nor did B20.
Okay.
Yep.
And the other thing that I'm all for is we could reduce 25%. We just get out of the ferry business. Pass that on to council member Hitchin.
She might be with you on that one. All right, thank you, Councilmember Morrell. Councilmember Krueger has another question.
Thank you. Quickly, I guess it's just kind of a clarification. I'm glad you brought up the R99 because I'm wondering, I've heard the owner of a trucking firm mention, he says, you could breathe the exhaust coming out of our trucks if it weren't for the heat because it's such clean burn.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that is the R99.
I don't know what they're using. I will say if in a brand new truck, diesel runs much cleaner than it used to. And that's because of states like California improving the standards over and over and over again. So our diesel is cleaner than it would have been 20 years ago coming out of a truck. You don't see those big black smokes like we used to see it younger. But I don't know I don't know what fuel they're running specifically.
Yeah, I just figured if you can breathe it, if it weren't for the heat, then diesel really isn't even an issue anymore. So if that's the case. But I'm assuming.
From a clean air standpoint, we still have a lot of retrofitting of older diesel that
Makes
for
sense.
sure is an issue. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, any other questions? Thank you so much. These were all great questions and comments. All right, seeing none, thank you guys
Thank you
both
very
for
much.
coming. Thank you for your good work. I am very excited to see the land conservation plan. Super excited, so thanks for all your work on that as well. Mr. Krueger, would you like to introduce the next group?
Certainly, thank you, Chair. So our next item up for conversation this afternoon also comes from a 2024-2025 budget ordinance. It was the policy that concerned electrical first implementation. And Section 31 of Ordinance Number 2023-65S says that the Finance Department shall report to this committee on its plan for implementing the county's electric first policy, including installation of the necessary infrastructure to support the deployment of electrical vehicles throughout Pierce County's fleet. The department shall identify any barriers to the provision of electrical vehicle infrastructure and identify the existing policies and practices utilized by Pierce County to support the integration and maintenance of electrical vehicles in our fleet. And so with that, we have a presentation that's been prepared by facilities management, and I believe with fleet rental, also in assistance. The presentation will provide an overview of Fleet Services' ongoing analysis of the EV efforts to acquire more vehicles and charging stations and infrastructure throughout the county. They also have provided some information in the presentation today about the county's building decarbonization efforts, and finally have an update on electrical vehicle fleet deliveries. And I believe Steve Wambach is going to kick things off, who is the Deputy Director of Facilities, and then turn the presentation over to Stephanie and to Quentin Brown to finish up. Thank you.
All right, welcome, Mr. Wambach.
Good afternoon, Committee Chair, members of the Council. I am Steve Wambach. I'm the Deputy Director of Facilities Management. I am not with the Finance Department, although this presentation has traditionally been led by Finance. Wolf Opitz, who is the Deputy Director of Finance, appeared before this committee, I believe, 7 times. This is actually the second budget that this proviso was part of, so presentations have dated back till April of 2022. Wolf retired at the end of last year. I believe that his visit to you in December was one of his very last public presentations, and the Deputy Executive asked me to pinch hit to lead this off today. And so let's go to the next slide. So joining me, as Mr. Krueger said, is Stephanie Liesel, who manages our resource conservation program in the Facilities Management Department. And we also have Quentin Brown, who is the county's fleet manager. And so I am not going to stand here and read to you your budget proviso. Suffice it to say that we have, as I mentioned at the top, facilities and finance have been joining usually at the same presentation that Planning and Public Works has presented on the sustainability plan dating back to 2022. And so what we have for you in the next 10 to 15 minutes or so Stephanie will be talking about some of the work on implementing clean buildings with the county and some of the work we've been doing on electric vehicle infrastructure. And then Quentin will talk about the actual electric vehicle purchases. So I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie now.
Perfect, thank you. Welcome, Ms. Liesel. Thanks for being here with us.
Being probably one of the shorter people in this room.
I probably have you beat.
Yes, my name is Stephanie Liesel, and I'm the Resource Conservation Program Senior Planner for Facilities. Here to tell you a little bit about our work in terms of infrastructure for the fleet, electrification process, and some of our work on our buildings. So starting out with fleet electrification, we have really kind of 3 areas where we've really been working on coordination on the efforts. Within the county, we have multiple departments that are installing EV infrastructure, whether it be facilities for fleet or for employee or public charging. Most of our efforts up to this point have really been focused on fleet infrastructure for being able to transfer our fleet over to a charging. And so, how are our facilities prepared or need to be upgraded to install that infrastructure? Planning and Public Works, through their equipment services section, also are working on infrastructure. Number of their buildings are maintained and operated by those staff in public planning and public works departments. So there's that effort happening. And then within parks, a number of our park sites are also, we're installing public EV infrastructure there. So there's a lot of departments where work is happening and seeing that there is a need to coordinate that effort, whether it be around the types of equipment that we're choosing to install, how that gets installed, how we're procuring that equipment, and how we're procuring the construction work of that. So part of the EV procedure that was updated last year called for developing a work group with the county, and so that team just kicked off earlier this month with our first meeting, talking about priorities, like what are our first actions and objectives for this group to be working on. Some of those really are focused around standardization of parking stalls, how many of those parking stalls need to be accessible parking stalls, especially when it comes to our fleet infrastructure. There's not really clear code directive on that. So, how as a county are we going to make that selection and direction? And again, standardization of our equipment around those efforts. It's also a great opportunity for us to share our lessons learned as we're installing this infrastructure. So Ryan mentioned the work of installing EV chargers at a number of planning and public works sites. That was a grant-funded project. As they entered into that, I was able to participate in a work group to help share what facilities has learned up to this point. Now that they've implemented that infrastructure, we're learning some new lessons, and that this EV work group is an opportunity to be sharing that information. Moving on, as Ryan mentioned, we facilities also participated in the Fleet Decarbonization Accelerator Program. A great opportunity for our county team to learn from other jurisdictions in the area. So Multnomah County was also a part of that accelerator program. City of Renton was a part of this particular cohort. And each of the 12-week cohort meetings, there were people within Washington and Oregon were able to present on those topics that we're working through ourselves. Great opportunity to see where the county is in lockstep with a lot of these other agencies in our region. We're all figuring things out as this field emerges and changes. So we're, again, opportunity to learn from others and for us to share our learnings. And then lastly, participating in a cross-county EV SE work group. This is predominantly a team from Kitsap, Snohomish, and King County, people like myself who are really involved with that infrastructure piece. how are we problem solving issues? So it's another opportunity for all of us to be sharing and working together regionally. Yeah. So lots of collaboration. So next slide. Moving on to some of our bigger infrastructure projects. These projects represent not only projects that are headed up by facilities, but also planning and public works. These recent installations and installations that will be installed in the next year or so, totaling $2.7 million. These are all, for the most part, focused on fleet infrastructure. You can see we've got a project at the annex, which is finishing up our pre-design there, with hopefully construction happening in the next 6 months. We've got a Riemann Hall project going in, also kind of on that same timeline. These two projects, the construction will be phase one. In future years, we'll be able to build out that infrastructure as our fleet transitions. So getting the electrical infrastructure there, the conduit in place, and then in future years, as we need to add chargers, that infrastructure is already there. So reducing future costs by doing the phased approach. We've got project that focus on county-wide kind of one-off projects that we're looking at installing some charging at 1501 Market, the Soundview building, the medical examiner building, and finally a couple of our corrections officers that park vehicles at the O2 jail, Sallyport, getting some infrastructure there. And then also including planning and public works projects that Ryan mentioned. That was a grant funded, but also supplemented with public works funds. Next slide, please. This is a brief glimpse at our current inventory of charging infrastructure across the county, broken down by which of those chargers are servicing fleet vehicles and which of those chargers are servicing either employees only or public and employees. So for instance, at the Yakima Garage, we have 4 chargers there that are on the upper levels. Those levels are only accessible to employees. So that's an example of an employee-only type charging infrastructure situation. So you can see we currently have 75 chargers. I should say ports, because nowadays there are chargers that two ports come off of it, and so we're really kind of focusing our efforts on that way, you get a little more infrastructure for lower cost.
Ms. Meisel, can I ask a quick question? Because it looks like we're moving to buildings next, right?
We will be.
Okay, so if anybody has questions about fleet, this will be a great time, or you can save it to the end as well. My question is in regards to the equipment. Are these chargers those fast chargers, or are they the slower chargers? And the issue came up actually in an Economic Development and Infrastructure Committee maybe a month or so ago that Councilmember Morrell arranged. And there was a comment by one of our manufacturing partners that he's found that if he had a fast charger, it's used a lot. The slower chargers, there's no one parked there. So, which makes sense if people are coming in and out. But just wanted to pose to you, what kind of equipment are we buying, and what do we find most used?
Absolutely, great question. Up to this point, we've been installing what are called level 2 chargers, which is a faster charge than plugging into a 110 outlet. Depending on the grade of level 2 charger, you can get around 100 to 150 miles added every 4 hours on a level 2 charge. That, as we are modeling what our fleet vehicles, the miles that they drive using fleet data, really serves most of our needs in terms of fleet. They might go out and drive 50 miles a day and have some vehicles might do big miles, 120 up to 200 miles a day, but that's not typical. So using some modeling that we had access to through the accelerator program helps us identify what kind of charging level is best. And so for the most part, we're focused on level 2 charging at the annex and Riemann Hall. We are planning for the fast charger, which is level 3, to serve, those vehicles that might come really depleted at the end of the day and are low or no charge. They'd have that access to a level 3 charge to where they could get up to 85% in, a matter of an hour, hour and a half.
Oh,
so,
great.
Yeah.
Okay,
So we'll have at the annex and at Riemann Hall, both capacities. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, we've got a couple other questions.
Yeah.
Councilmember Krueger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was kind of interested too on the charging, and how will that be metered out, in the sense, will the public have to pay if one department is visiting another department and has to charge? Do they charge each other's departments for the use, kind of a thing?
Another really great question, one that EVSE work group is going to kind of think about. Because we've talked about, if planning and public works is installing fleet infrastructure out at the CMF, it's not remote, but it's a farther distance out there. Yeah, we should be able, as a county, any department fleet should be able to utilize that equipment. And so, have definitely, as department to department, discussed that we want that to happen. But to your point, as to exactly how that gets implemented, physically as well as financially, is still yet to be decided upon. Mm-hmm.
And I know the electric vehicle chargers at the Yakima building have been there for a while. How does that work? Is it just first come, first serve, or are employees charged to use that? And go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I would think I was done.
Okay.
For the moment.
Up to this point, all of the public and employee charging has been free. There are increasing number of questions as to whether that should remain the point of the counties to provide free charging. A number of our neighboring jurisdictions aren't charging or have a fee structure. And so, we are looking at what that might look like and how that fee structure gets created. Like, what's the math to determine what you charge per hour or per session? There's a wide variety of options out there. So I think that there's a growing interest to begin some sort of fee structure for public and employee charging.
Is there any kind of a standard cost for, like, per wattage, or however it's measured?
What we're learning from other jurisdictions is that it's at least the cost of the energy, the electricity. Other jurisdictions are also adding kind of essentially a user fee that also helps pay for maintenance and replacement of that infrastructure. So those are all, items that we'll be looking at and making decisions around. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you might have to put an impact fee on that. Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, thanks for those questions. Councilmember Yamby.
Stephanie, I appreciate that. And it goes along those lines. I noticed that earlier, was it today, that we got an email in regards to the Yakima parking garage. And it was basically asking to limit the time that users are, charging. And then, so I was wondering, is that email because of limiting it due to demand? And then if so, then how many more EV stations should we install in the Yakima garage to keep up with that?
The email that went out is directly tied to demand and feedback that we've been receiving from employees that, pull into the Yakima garage later in the day or later in the morning, and those chargers are fully occupied. And from observations that the same vehicles are parked there all day long. Because those chargers are connected to a network, we have access to our dashboard, which will tell us how long a vehicle is plugged in for. We can't tell whose vehicle it is, or it's not associated with any particular person, but we can see when a charge was initiated and how long that charge lasted. And we've seen over the last, especially the last year, an uptick in the usage of those chargers. And so this was our first attempt to try and help make sure that those chargers are utilized by a diverse group of people, and that just because you arrive first there in the day that you get that charger. So we're hoping that an honor system will help improve that situation, but we're going to assess in 6 months and see if that usage has changed, and if that hasn't, then we'll reassess and look at some other options. Whether we install more chargers at Yakima Garage, that's another question. Is like there's probably the electrical capacity to do that, but if we're adding chargers there, then we're also not adding chargers at a site that doesn't have employee charging. And so how do you begin to utilize our financial resources so that multiple sites have access to charging?
Because I haven't gone down there in a while, but the Market Street location, and we're talking about adding employees there next year.
Yeah.
And so making sure that there's some equity and thinking about those things ahead of time. I appreciate that.
Yep.
All right, thank you for that question. Councilmember Morrell.
Yes, I think Chargers for All is a good plan, and just because you get there early doesn't mean you're a charger hog.
That's right.
And I could definitely lower my cost if I sat there all day and charged, so I didn't even have to do it at home. Someone's figured it out. Anyway, that's your challenge to deal with. One of the questions that I has the county ever looked at public-private partnerships on level 1 chargers?
We haven't dove real deep on infrastructure for the fleet side infrastructure. We've definitely discussed and need to do more research on charging for public and employee charging and using a third party to provide that service. Again, there are jurisdictions around us that are using that model to provide public charging. So essentially, we enter in a contract with a third party and they own and operate that infrastructure, and the county is kind of hands off.
I think that would obviously be a simpler way to multiply our ports, but there again, the public's always the last one to really have that light bulb come on when you're dealing with public-private partnerships. But if something like that could be used, because just the cost of those level 1 chargers are incredible. Mm-hmm. I'm hearing it from all my commercial developers now that because of the sustainability, whatever laws that were now passed through the energy code, they have to include level 1s and level 2s on all commercial development now.
Yep, that was when Sprinker did the major site renovation there. Part of that, because the parking was impacted, that code was triggered, and now we have 17 chargers, public-facing chargers out at Sprinker. Yeah, and that was a huge cost. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And pertaining to parks especially, I know this isn't just Washington, just Pierce County, but the theft of those ports has been through the roof. Are we doing anything to monitor those so we don't have to constantly repair those?
Yeah, we are part of the EVSE work group within the county. We're monitoring, so parks and facilities and PPW are communicating on that and strategizing. The interesting thing about the vandalism issue, so what's happening at a lot of accessible charging stations, the cords are getting cut, and the whole cord and the then walks away. It's a regional issue. Surprisingly, it's kind of a Northwest issue. When we talk to colleagues on the East Coast in New York City, they're like, what problem? We have no problem. It's like,
Really?
yeah, these chargers are sitting out at the street, on the street corner and on curbs, and they're just not getting hit. So yeah, here in the Northwest, we're scratching our head, like, how do we address this? There are some third-party or businesses out there that initially dealt with the catalytic converter issue, that are now developing kind of a cord cover that you can put on aftermarket. So that's an option potentially. So we're talking with Parks about that. But unfortunately, our charging manufacturers out there that are supplying this equipment aren't really interested in changing design standards because it's just a small portion of their customers. So there was legislation at the state level here to try and create an EV work group to address the vandalism issue. Unfortunately, that didn't get passed, but that regional group, I think, will kind of fill that void. Yeah, our Parks Department has been hit multiple times, and at the Cross Park, they've decided we're not going to replace that until we can get a solution.
Yeah. I was going to mention District 3's park, but I held back. But since you put it up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Absolutely.
Well, that's frustrating. All right. Thank you. I think we're ready to move on to buildings.
Okay, next slide, please. It sat there for so long, it wanted to stay there. So on our building decarbonization side of our work, that first part is just a repeat of what I shared in December as we begin to track electrification or decarbonization of our buildings. Using 2023 as a benchmark, we had 50 out of 69 of our buildings were all electric. Then in 2024, we bought the 1501 building, which is it doesn't have any gas equipment. There's no gas hookup at that building. And then we also completed a project out at the South Hill Sheriff's Precinct in association with a roofing project and the HVAC project. We moved that equipment from gas infrastructure to electric heat pumps. And to Councilmember Kruger's question earlier, initial evaluation of energy savings at that site, accommodating also for an increase in rates for our electricity costs. We're roughly seeing a 2% drop in our energy use. When you go to electric, we saw a slight bump in electricity use because we have new electric equipment on that, but our overall energy use has dropped slightly. I don't have a number for you in terms of cost, but that's in the first year, 12 months of that use of that equipment, we're seeing a positive outcome there. And then moving on to other updates, we were awarded $160,000 in Washington Clean Energy Grant. More on the solar. We have a solar feasibility project that is fully underway where we're looking at about 30 county-owned sites to see what is the feasibility of installing solar at that site, whether it be roof-mounted or ground-mounted. Narrowing that 30 down to approximately 5 priority sites. And our priorities include cost and maintenance of that infrastructure, what would be the energy savings of installing that infrastructure, and then what would be the environmental impacts of that infrastructure. So at the end of the study, which here will wrap up in June, we'll have 5 highlighted sites with a more detailed life cycle cost analysis of those projects and what it would mean to implement them. with the intent of applying for future grant money for that construction work, if it shows that it makes sense to do so. The second bullet there, we also received grant money from Department of Commerce to do 4 energy audits on the rest of our Tier 1 buildings, which are 50,000 square feet or larger. So these are all buildings that have to comply with the Wash and Clean Building Standard. That work is complete, and we're now beginning to look at the results of that and see which projects, which energy efficiency projects that came out of those audits need to be implemented over the future years. And then finally, where we stand in terms of reaching and compliance with the standard. That first bullet actually needs a correction. It should say 5 out of 7 of our buildings are on track to comply. The health department building, which the county actually owns, but the health department leases, we've got a big delta to make up to be able to meet the target. So we're working with our health department colleagues on what that might look like. And then the other building that's not on track yet is the Sprinkler Recreation Center. There's a lot of complexities with that because it's an ice skating rink, and the way the state established targets for recreation centers, ice skating rinks, they didn't accommodate for the amount of energy. It's a really intense energy use. So there's that challenge, but the Parks Department has a grant, a federal grant, a block grant that they're using to work with their design team in terms of the redevelopment of that site to incorporate all the energy efficiency measures that would bring that building into compliance. So that's a few years out, and funding for that construction hasn't been identified. So we are not identifying that as a on-track building yet, even though there's work being done to make sure that that happens. And that is my last slide. I'm going to turn it over to Quentin.
All right, welcome, Mr. Brown.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Thanks for being here.
Not a
We
problem.
are good.
My name is Quentin Brown, obviously, and I'm the fleet manager down at the finance side of the fleet. So as it shows on our report, ever since the EV First initiative went into play, we've been following the EV First policy when it comes to purchasing our vehicles. To date, we have 29 total EVs in service in our light-duty fleet. Our fleet size is a little over 600 cars that we oversee. In 2025, when these numbers were taken, we were a little over 15,000 miles in EV miles driven. As of today, we're over 21,000, so you can see even in the middle of February, beginning of March, when those numbers were retrieved, we're putting on more and more. So we have more drivers out there who are driving these EVs and getting the miles in, which is reducing the gas emissions as well as gas consumption. In our fleet, we have 179 currently that are hybrids. And some of you that were here prior know that we had some vehicle purchasing issues over COVID where we could not get vehicles because of manufacturing delays, order cancellations, and things like that. The vehicles had to be moved into the next biennium. I'm happy to say that all of those vehicles are now arrived and we are caught up. The only vehicles we're waiting on now are 14. 13 of those are for the Sheriff's Department that are going to be arriving to us fully outfitted. And then we have one brand new addition to the Human Services Division, which they just placed an order for a couple months ago. So all of our post-dated stuff that we've been waiting on has finally arrived, is in service, and working out great. Other than that, we're on track with the help of facilities and getting all of our EV infrastructure installed. And that's been one of our hurdles to getting more and more EVs added, is just nowhere to charge them. Currently in the next biennium, our plan is to add at least 33 more EVs to our fleet, and then progressing that each year as we go forward, as long as the infrastructure is there to support them.
Awesome, good job. I know it was a lot to coordinate, especially during the supply issue time period. So thank you for sticking with that.
Yeah, it really was. Not a problem.
All right, Councilmember Krueger has a question.
Thank you, Chair, but it wasn't for this presentation.
Oh, okay, well, why don't we take questions on this one and then we'll go back, if that's all right. Okay, Councilmember Morrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Brown, Were you the individual that caught the scammers?
Yes, sir. That was
Tell us the story again.
Well, I came to work and opened up the state cars website to, again, during the time where cars aren't coming in, trying to figure out where our status is. And I noticed that there were some vehicles on there that we typically do not buy. Contacted my partner out in ESS and asked by chance, did you order some Nissans or Mitsubishis? And he said no. So then started all the phone calls to the dealerships asking, how they got these orders, and hearing the surprised tones in their voices when I told them that I didn't order any of those cars, and that 7 of them had been delivered to a residence in the east side of Tacoma. So yeah, it was a very interesting day, and I have to give credit to the sheriff's department, because once they got involved, I think I found these vehicles maybe 5 o'clock in the morning is when I noticed something was wrong. By 8 or 8:30, I had contacted the dealerships once they opened. By 9 or 9:30, I had contacted law enforcement. And by 7:30 that evening, I was standing in the parking lot with my son, and all the vehicles were back and accounted for and not damaged. So the sheriff's department really stepped up and was able to get all of those back that same day.
Well, for myself as a council member and a taxpayer, I appreciate your work on that and just noticing it and then asking questions and following through. So I appreciate that.
You're
I
very
really
welcome.
do.
It was,
Thank you.
It was surreal, just knowing that actually happened, that it got that far. There was one dealer that I talked to in Auburn. It was a Volkswagen dealership who had gotten some fraudulent orders from the same individual, and they did not proceed with the order because they saw something wrong. So it could have been much higher car count than what it was.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
That's amazing. Thank you for bringing that up. That's great story. Councilmember Ayala.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. And thank you so much for doing that.
You're welcome.
I did have a question. I think you might have answered it, but just want to make sure. In terms of the vehicle replacement and kind of asset management of this, you talked about we are expecting 33 more vehicles in the next biennium.
Our plan is to purchase 33 more EVs.
EVs.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the replacement plan that we have, we look at the vehicles, how many miles are being driven, when their expected life cycle is going to end, and then we base our replacement list off of that. I've gone through that list and identified 33 of those vehicles that could be replaced with EVs, and that's what we're going to plan to do, unless we get to the situation where charging infrastructure is not available, vehicles are not available, then we would drop to the next tier, which would be hybrids, sticking with that EV first policy, putting the EVs in play where we can get them into play, as long as we can get them and we have ample infrastructures to do it.
Got it. Follow-up, Chair, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Is about the 33 mark typical for vehicle replacement per year?
Oh, no.
No?
No. We're looking at next year, I believe it's 114 vehicles that are going to get replaced next year. So I have about 58 that will be hybrids, 20 that are slated to be gas, and those are mainly for Sheriff's Department, 33 EVs, and then the plan is for 3 diesel trucks for the animal control, because they have to tow the horse trailers and things like that, so they need a little bit more towing capacity than what a gas engine can provide.
Got it. And then my last question, unfortunately, considering what we know about our tariffs right now, is there a plan or how is that informing?
That is a great question. That's a very, very good question. And I know that the finance department is involved in talks right now on how they're going to tackle that should there be tariffs that impact us. We already know that there are currently some tariffs that will impact some upfitting costs. We have advised the other departments that although we can provide you estimates to date, we don't know how much more those are going to increase down the road. And finance, like I said, is in talks to figure out how, like Julie DeMuth, they're trying to figure out how they're going to handle that. My suppliers are telling me, hey, here's today's prices with little asterisks. yet these could go up, 25, 35%. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to impact us yet. We're looking into it. It may be that if it gets really bad, even though we have 114 vehicles slated, we may have to reduce that number to meet up with our budget of what we got. We'll just kind of have to see how budget comes out with their decisions on what they want to do. And then once we go to place the order at the end of this year, what are we able to do and what are things looking like at that point?
Got it. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for those questions. Councilmember Krueger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Your story is so much more better than mine. More better? Is that a word?
It's better.
Where did I hear that before?
That's okay.
I just about got taken for $100 gift cards, Visa cards. And so, well, now I've caught it before I sent them. So anyway, the tariff thing was interesting as I was listening to someone yesterday, and some places are, we've got the tariff, so they bumped the price, even though it really wasn't doing it. So there's just interesting things on that. I'm interested in, the lifespan of these EVs in the sense, I know that like at the skills center, the kids aren't allowed to work on an EV car because of the danger of that. So it's limited capacity on who can work on them should they break down. But I understand they really don't break down. But I would think there could be electrical issues that can happen. And how does that factor in with the lifespan of the vehicles? What kind of mileage do you take on them before you would recycle those out? That kind of a scenario.
Yeah, that's a great question.
In the maintenance of these things.
Prior to coming to the county, I spent 18 years at a Ford dealership in Kent, senior master technician there. I worked on the vehicles bumper to bumper, tires to roof, was a hybrid or a EV certified technician. Back in the days where they had you wear rubber gloves, face masks, you had what we called a technician disconnect pull, which is a long fiberglass rod, so in case something happened, they could yank you off the car. You had to put cones up all the way around the vehicle so nobody would come into the danger zone. The technology has gotten so much more advanced that a lot of those restrictions are now gone, and they're much safer to work on, although there are hazards that are involved. Our plan down at the garage is we're going to handle the EVs just as we would any other vehicle. We're going to make sure that our technicians are trained to be able to work on them safely. And then, like you mentioned, there are no problems with them really. We've had, out of the 29 vehicles we have in service now, we've only had one EV that spent 3 months at a Chevy dealer getting fixed because of a module issue. Some speculation as to why it took that long. Could have been a part, could have been technician error programming it. We're really not exactly sure. But that's the only vehicle that we've ever had a problem with EV-wise. Everything else we've had no problems with. We've had a couple older Priuses that we've had to put batteries in. But that wasn't very hard to do. We just contacted our local Toyota dealer, sent the vehicle down there, they put in a battery and got it taken care of. So I don't foresee any issues with workability of them, with my technicians being able to service the vehicles at all. I know that in some of the work groups that we've talked with and the EV coalition that we just got done, there was some mention of concerns with servicing and things. And I just, with my experience in previous to the county and with the county, we don't have that problem. We're going to be okay. As far as lifespan on the vehicles is, we have not put a mileage lifespan on the EVs to date. We put a year expiration on them. So all EVs that are in service today will go at least 10 years. At the 10-year mark is when we will evaluate if that vehicle should be kept or should be disposed, because that's when the warranty wears out, and that's when things start to get really expensive. You could look at a battery pack that could cost anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000, and I don't think that's a wise use. So 10 years, when that warranty is done, that's our current plan, is to recycle that vehicle on to the auction and replace it then. We have one vehicle that's in service with Planning and Land Services. It's a Ford Lightning pickup truck. I believe it's a 2023. He has almost 20,000, if not over 20,000 miles on it. And that's only in the last 2 years that he's had it. So I could just imagine where he's going to be at in 10 years, when we get up there. So.
Is it 10 years or 100,000 miles? Which
it is 10 years, and I forget what the mileage is. I think the mileage is a little bit higher on the EV components. I believe it might be upwards of 150, but I'd have to check on that and see. But at least the 10-year mark on the hybrid components, or the EV components, excuse me.
Let's see, I'm at 275,000.
Yeah, so we're going to have to watch him really close to see what he gets because he puts on a lot of miles per day. He was actually one of the biggest proponents against EVs, didn't want anything to do with them. They put him in that vehicle, and he absolutely loves it. He puts on anywhere from maybe 140 to 150 miles a day. He's found some unforeseen benefits of the vehicle. He has lower back issues, and because of the package that we have to buy, we can't deviate from it. It's whatever this is on the state contract. This truck happened to come with heated seats. It really helps his lower back, and he says now after a long day in the truck, he gets out and his back is great. It doesn't hurt. As well as it's called a frunk, so the hood opens up where your engine would typically be. There's nothing there. It's a trunk in the front of the truck. So he's been able to lay his plans out for his inspections and keep them out of the rain, give them a little bit of cover, and be able to work out of the front of that vehicle, plus a couple other things. So they've been a great success, and he's really enjoying it. And we can't wait to get more implemented where we can, when we can.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Awesome. Councilmember Ayala.
Thank you, Chair. Just out of curiosity, do you have any apprentice on your technician team?
We do not have any apprentices at this time, although we did apply for and get approved for our first internship ever. And so that intern will be starting with me at the beginning of June and be working with us through the summer. I have expressed interest with, if we can do it, working with local skills centers and colleges to get interns and apprentices in there when we can. So I'm a big proponent of that. I came from the Ford Asset Program. So I went to Renton Technical College, went through the Ford training program. I had a sponsoring dealer. I go back and forth every 6 months. It really provides valuable skills because not everybody set out to go to college. A lot of people like working with their hands, and as being a product of that, I see the value in it and love to put something together.
Great. Thank you.
That is awesome. I sent that internship opportunity to a couple people, so I'm excited to see who you chose. Councilmember Morrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to follow up on committee member Ayala's comment.
Oh, are we okay? Okay, we're good.
Okay.
Oh, you're done.
Yeah, when the guy jumps up and down, we take notice. Following up on that, I've heard that workforce is a real challenge.
Yes.
Because, I was a knuckle buster back in the day, came out of Clover Park. Okay, turning wrenches on a combustible engine is totally different than what you're doing nowadays. In looking at workforce, I hear it from my transit operators. They cannot get enough staffing to electrify their fleets, even if they could get all the buses they need. So how are you mentioned you were working with does any of the technical college, are they moving into this curriculum? The skill center you mentioned, are you partnering with any of them to try and get the workforce?
Currently to this point, we're not partnering with it. I do have some connections at a couple colleges that I talk to. They are implementing more and more EV training courses into it. Tesla's got a couple around the area. There was another one that was going up in Renton Technical College that they're going to do. And that goes back to my desire to try to incorporate some sort of an internship program with us and partner with local colleges and things to help build those programs. Because you're absolutely right. The manpower out there to work on these vehicles, not just EVs alone, but all of them in general, that was one of the biggest issues that we were running into in COVID was, we'd have these cars break down under warranty. They'd have to go up to the dealership to get fixed, but they don't have the manpower to do it because they don't have the trained staff that'll get it done. And that really affects us in the long run, right? Because only my guys can do only so much. At certain points, they have to go to the dealer. Although we have gone through the steps, we are certified by Ford to do in-house warranty work and recall repairs. So we are making strides that way to keep as much in-house as we can. But the workforce is suffering. They do need more technicians. They do need more help in that area. And we would love to be a part of it. And I would love to have the conversations with my department more to try to implement a program where it's a revolving program, not just this one internship, which is great. I'm really looking forward to it. So are my guys. But I'd like this to be a continuing thing where we could sponsor with Clover Park or Bates or TCC if they have one, and be a place where they could send somebody down to learn. We're a small shop. We have 4 guys total that work down there, 3 technicians and myself. So we don't have, it couldn't be like at the Ford dealer where we would guarantee you, hey, when you're done, you have a job. But it's at least somewhere for them to get their foot in the door, to get the training, the experience from people that have been in the industry a long time, and get that hands-on knowledge to get them prepared for going to maybe the dealership or a private repair shop in the area that can help out. So we're all on board for that, and I'd love to make it happen. Really would.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Excellent. Okay, I don't see any other questions about this, but I know that Councilmember Krueger had a question about, I'm assuming, buildings. Yes. Oh, wait, hold on. I'm sorry. Councilmember Yamby, is your question about cars or buildings?
Building.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you, Mr. Brown. All right, Ms. Liesel. And Councilmember Krueger, go ahead.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. I've just always been a nervous Nelly when it comes to solar panels and whatnot, because I just see them being lined up along Mountain Highway at some point when they've served their purpose, whatever. And then I always look at, if you're putting them on buildings, what about hail? Because I know that there's been accidents on the golf course when the golf ball. And, when it's cloudy or when seagulls are flying over and how do they get cleaned? And then when they're done, what is the plan at the county for all of these solar panels that could be implemented?
Yeah, a lot of questions there. What we know so far with the electrical engineers that are doing the analysis for us, in terms of your question about like cloudy weather and being able to capture energy that way, the newer panels are better equipped, and that's one thing that they'll be looking at is like of the 30 sites which are more conducive to better exposure, whether it be cloudy or not, but whether it be buildings that are shading the roof or trees that are shading the roof. So that's kind of worked into the analysis in terms of what the energy output would be of a system. On the recyclability and what happens to them at the end, I know that Washington State is trying to put forth a better like producer responsibility effort on making sure that there's infrastructure here in Washington or regional to where those panels, once they've worn out, or broken or whatever, have a place to go and be recycled. Currently, that's not a robust system that we have in Washington, but they're working on that, especially with the growth in the industry here. The question about the hail, I'm not the technical expert on that in terms of how they're designed to minimize impact like that. The question about maintenance, like birds,
dust.
Yeah, that would be ongoing maintenance, just like any of our other equipment at our facilities that have to be maintained on a regular basis. So that equipment would either be there'd be preventative maintenance work done on those systems, whether internally or contracted out.
Maybe I'd feel better if there was something to compare it to, because I'm thinking that for like a homeowner to replace a panel was several $100s. And you have to, and then if you have to like, oh, my roof needs to be re-roofed and I've got all of these panels on my roof.
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of ask that question back to our
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, analysts and find out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right. And let's see, Mr. Morrell. Oops.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To follow up on the solar panel discussion, do solar panels produce heat?
Oh, like is heat radiated off of them?
Right.
I don't know that answer.
I'm just curious, if you do a lot of rooftops and it generates heat, then do you have a offset on the cooling because of the heat buildup.
Sure.
And, you know,
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
thinking out loud.
I'll find out. Yep.
Because they are usually black. I
Or
mean,
dark, yeah, at least a dark
I mean, I haven't
color.
seen any
Mhm.
white ones yet, or mauve, or you know, color combos. But anyway, I'm just kind of curious to see if
Yeah, I'm
there's an
not
offset.
sure on the engineering and the chemistry of that, how that works.
Okay,
Yep,
just curious.
I'll find out.
If you can find that answer,
Yes.
that'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good questions from the committee. I have one last question. So in regards to the Yakima Garage, is there, if we are seeing the high demand, as was said, is there anything that the council can do to help facilitate like new charger installations or things like that?
I'm going to defer that question to Steve. He's the one that controls the money.
Gee, thanks a lot. For the record, Steve Wambach, Deputy Director of Facilities. The challenge that we're facing at the Yakima Garage is that it is the primary employee parking for the county city building campus. We are currently at a point where any new employees being hired are not given parking, or being suggested that we have another parking lot on the 1100 block of Fawcett, a little bit under a quarter mile away, and we're offering parking there. We're offering parking at another lot on Court E. So at this point, putting more EV chargers into the Yakima Garage would mean removing general parking spaces. That may be what we end up doing, but right now we don't have in our 24-25 budget additional EV chargers at the Yakima Garage. Generally speaking, and my recommendation would be to pause on any major changes in the Yakima Garage until the county council relocates from this building to the 1501 Market Building. Most of the council staff, I believe there are about 25 council staff that are currently parking in the Yakima Garage. That will take some pressure off the building. And also, as the prosecuting attorney's office moves staff among different buildings, it might remove a little pressure on the garage. And at that point, as we look into 26, 27, exploring whether we could sacrifice some general purpose parking spaces for EV spaces would be part of the conversation. I'll be frank that the other part of the conversation is that we have proportionally too many compact marked stalls in the Yakima Garage compared to the variety of vehicles driven by county employees. And employees often struggle to park between the lines in the garage, and that's also impacting the availability of spaces. So, and we're working with our parking vendor. Employees, unfortunately, regularly get little notes from our parking vendor reminding them, please park within the lines. So, long answer there. We would like to put more EV, but it's sort of a moving set of puzzle pieces to make sure we do that fairly.
And we appreciate that. I think that's good for the committee to know that we're borderline bursting at the seams, yes, and are just trying to wait it out until that we can do some more shifting of the Tetris pieces. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Any other? Oh, okay. Staff.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask a question for Steve, since you're up there, Steve? Do you know how many parking spots there are in the Yakima Garage?
Off the top of my head,
and the follow-up is how many EV stalls?
there are 4. I can tell you there are 4 EV stalls in the Yakima
Does
Garage.
that include jury?
No, there are no EV stalls in the jury lot. So
Okay,
there
so
are
a
the
total
jury
of 4.
area. There are approximately, I believe it's 90 or so jury stalls and 190, 200 general employee stalls.
Okay. And so for the committee's benefit, I'm looking at a bill that's coming our way. It's the implementation of the comprehensive plan. And the county is going to be considering a new regulatory standard that requires a minimum of 10% of all parking in any new facility to be EV. And so I think it's something worth thinking about as council moves forward concerning our own facilities and the number of parking spaces that the county's providing in its parking if we're going to ask, and require other entities to provide 10% of their parking stalls EV compatible. So something to think about as we take a look at this very large piece of legislation that you're going to be looking at in this committee here in the next month or so. 10%.
Excellent point. Thank you, staff. All right. Committee member Ayala.
There you go. Out of curiosity, I feel a little lost in the sauce here, Steve. Are the 4 EV charging stations the ones that are currently marked as maintenance vehicles only?
No, so in the Yakima garage, which is at the corner of Yakima Avenue and 10th Street, opposite the 2002 jail edition, those are just they're for employees. There are some, I believe the council member is referring to some electric vehicle charging stations that are inside the secure compound adjacent to between the 2002 jail and the main jail. Those are the ones that I believe there are 1 or 2 that are marked maintenance vehicles, and then are there 3? There are 3 at the foot of Knollmeyer Lane, which are generally available for, I believe Fleet has been parking 1 pool EV there. And I think there's also opportunity for employees who are coming in from remote buildings to park their electric vehicle there. The former Planning and Public Works Director I know used to, both the 2 prior Planning and Public Works Directors would drive EVs to meetings at the council and park in one of those spaces.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Committee member Morrell. Oops, there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, to follow up on Mr. Kruger's question, how many charge stations are at the Market Street?
Currently 0.
Oh.
Because there were, when that building was originally built in 1992, there were no EVs in 1992 to speak of. When the prior owner acquired the property across the street at 1502 Market for the parking lot and built out that lot, there was also no standard. So there were no requirements for the prior owner to have EVs. So when we purchased the building, there were none there. Also, in light of the fact that that building was essentially vacant, dating back to 2018, the owner had phased most of their employees out of the building even pre-pandemic. So there was never any work for EV charging prior to our ownership. We are going to be putting a few EV chargers in to that building, not 10% of the parking spaces. Frankly, I don't, from a operator of existing parking facilities perspective, it's as just with the Yakima garage, it's a balancing act between different types of demand. And so trying to get all that balanced out, which is a very different situation than if you are proposing to build something brand new, particularly on a green space, new building with new parking. There are different, just like there are different parking requirements, there'd be different building requirements, different energy requirements that you would have to meet as a developer. So it's a little bit of a different situation for an existing building.
Okay, well, we'll tackle that one, I guess. The other thing is, what is your new title now?
I don't have a new title. I'm still the Deputy Director of Facilities Management. I've actually kept the same title for 5 years, which is unusual for me. Yeah. For the council members who are not here, I've been with the county since 1993, and while I was in the same job for 25 years, my title changed a number of different times. So some council members like to tease me about that.
Okay, and since you're in your same role for the last 5 years,
yes.
you do have influence on getting us out of this building, right?
Yes. Well, the This body, as well as the county executive, purchased a building at 1501 Market Street. Construction is underway. I believe our department director, Carl Imlig, and our construction staff briefed the council on this last week. And it's my understanding that the council will be moving to that building at the end of 2025.
There you go. Then there's your answer for Yakima's garage.
Where there will be people out of the Yakima garage, correct.
Get out of here, and then they can add 10% to that building. And here, and 10% there, and 40 million here. And
thank you for
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, council member.
the information and a bit of levity. I'm going to go to committee member Kruger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just was curious, do you have a guesstimate on the cost of putting in one unit, new construction and retrofit?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. For an EV chart, for a double-headed, specifically for a double-headed EV charging unit, we will get you that answer. Our project at the annex on South 35th Street, I believe, I don't have my papers in front of me, 1.475 million is the cost of upgrading the electrical feed to that building to eventually be able to add up to 90 EV charging ports over the next few biennia. 15 port, I believe 15.
It'll be 24 ports added.
24 ports will be added as part of that initial project, but we will get you the specific breakdown on what those charging ports cost a piece.
Because there would be the construction part, but also the unit itself.
That's correct. There's an infrastructure piece, and then there's the appliance. I tend to, and that's the analogy I tend to use a lot, that we have in an office space, you have electricity coming in, and then you plug in a photocopier. The charging ports are like the photocopier. It's the appliance that plugged in. It does get a little bit more complicated than that because we have energy management systems, and at a place like the annex where you be plugging in multiple vehicles, you have 24 ports there, you plug in 24 vehicles, they will not all charge at the same time. There will be a computer that will deliver the power to the vehicle that needs it the most to get that one charge, and then it will move on to the next one. It's a way to manage the energy flow.
I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for the questions. Any other thing? Anyone else?
Going.
All right.
Thank you very much for having us here today.
Thank you for being here. All right. Mr. Kruger, are there any other business?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just mention to the committee that your next committee meeting is on May 5th. You will be hearing from David Kinley with the Planning and Public Works Department talking about the implementation of the permit workflow improvement project. There's also going to be a discussion, I think tomorrow on EIDC on a similar topic, and so the next couple of weeks you'll be hearing a bit from the department regarding the permitting process, lessons learned subsequent to the workflow improvement legislation that you adopted last fall. You'll also have one action item. We are anticipating receiving the confirmation bill to confirm Travis Buell, who is the interim Park and Recreation Department Director. And so you'll be meeting Mr. Buell in the committee on May 5th. And that is what we anticipate for your next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kruger. Sounds like we've got plenty of interesting topics coming up. All right, moving on to item 8, adjournment. So we are adjourning this meeting at 3:18. We're adjourned.